Hey guys, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and this time I've got a full tank review for you on the Tier 10 British heavy tank, the FV215b. The FV215b has one of the highest hit points in the game, which allows it to take an absolute punishment when combined with its decent frontal armor. The vehicle also has the second highest DPM of any heavy tank in World of Tanks, meaning that the moment that your opponents don't take you seriously, you can leave them as smoldering wrecks on the battlefield, one by one by one. And if that sounds like the tank for you, hang around, I've got multiple Ace Tanker gameplays coming right up after I do a full analysis of this tank's statistics. And if you have no interest in playing the FV215b, hang around anyway and I'll show you how to take them out effectively on the battlefield. So one thing you'll immediately notice about the FV215b is that the turret placement is at the back. And this can be very bizarre because the previous tank, the Conqueror, that you will have to have played through to get to the FV215b has the turret very firmly towards the front of the tank. What this means is that when you try and come around a corner with the FV215b, you often leave a very easy shot for your opponents to take your tracks off and damage the weak side armor that this vehicle has. And so something that you've got to get used to very quickly with the FV215b is side scraping. Having a rear mounted turret means that you can keep the side armor of your tank very well angled while still getting your turret round that corner to engage your opponents. Unlike what the Conqueror could possibly begin to have done, as it would have had to have exposed the lower front plate to be able to do so. You also might be wondering, why has it taken you so long to get a tank review of the FV215b? And that's because for the last year, Wargaming have kept teasing us with this, the Chieftain, which at one point was a firm replacement for the FV215b, but now I don't even know what they're going to do with it. And so for all intents and purposes, the FV215b is here to stay, so let's see how it stacks up compared to some of its rivals. So here we have the FV215b on the left, the T10 in the center, and the Chinese recently buffed 113 on the right. Immediately we see that the FV215b has some monstrous DPM, over 2,750. This tank has the second highest DPM in the game on any heavy tank, second only to the T57 Heavy, but that vehicle has an autoloader, which I guess makes it more bursty and less continuous like the FV215b. The FV215b has 15% better DPM than the T10 and that is significant. The penetration is 1mm better than the E5, but 10mm better than the 113, and that certainly does help. Of course, the alpha damage on the 120mm main armament that this tank gets is not quite as good as the 122mm that the 113 uses, so you're going to have to put more rounds out. But the disparity isn't really the same as when you compare this tank to, for example, the 130mm on the IS-7 or the 128mm on the Mouse, or if you choose to use that gun on the E100. One thing that's quite disappointing about the FV215b is that it can only carry 35 rounds, and so if you're not careful with your ammunition and you ricochet quite a few of them, you can quite often be running out of rounds towards the end of the battle, forcing you to either use your APCR shells or just run out altogether. But the weapon handling on this tank more than makes up for that. 1.7 seconds aim time, one of the best in the game on any type of tank, which makes even the excellent 2 seconds of aim time on the T10 pale in comparison and completely demolishes the 2.8 seconds of aim time on the Chinese 113. Also, this aim time just gets better when you look at the dispersion values, which are massively better than the E5 and the 113 at 0.1 while moving and also while turning the turret and the tank. And also this vehicle is more accurate at 0.33, which is very nice compared to 0.35 and 0.37. But the good news ends when it comes to the flexibility of the gun, as the elevation is 15 degrees and the depression is only 7. That's 1 degree less than the E5, which means that there are less locations where you can go hull down in the FV215b. The tank is also slightly slower than the E5, but massively slower than the 113 with a 34 km/h top speed limit. And this tank disappointingly only goes at 12 km/h backwards, which can be very frustrating when your opponents are trying to flank you and get your weaker side armor. Now, while this tank gets a very meaty engine of 950 horsepower, it is a heavy old girl, just weighing shy of 70 tons. Way heavier than the T10 and the 113, so don't go ramming an FV215b, otherwise you're going to regret it. But this means that the power to weight ratio of the tank is significantly worse than the E5 and that of the 113. And the terrain resistances are not that much better on hard and the same on medium terrain as the 113. only slightly better on soft, which makes this tank feel quite sluggish, but not anywhere near the league of that of a Mouse or an E100 as an example. Luckily, the turret traverse and the tank traverse speeds are excellent, better than that of the E5 and the 113, which can allow you to quickly re-engage your opponents and not give up the very weak and large side profile of your tank. So what about the armor of the FV215b? Well, the garage states 152 at the front, 101 at the side, and 76 at the rear, with 254 on the turret, 152 on the side, and 101 at the back. But when we look at it in more detail, we can see this tank has a horrific lower plate. 76 millimeters thick, which means that even if you angled the lower plate of your tank like this, it's still only got 175 millimeters of effective hull armor. And then you have to expose your side armor, which is 101 millimeters thick above here, and only 50 millimeters along here, although it does have some spaced armor which can help. The only truly thick part of the tank, at least with regards to the front hull armor, is this upper plate, which is 152 and quite well angled. And so if you're shooting at an FV215b, don't be fooled to take a shot at the upper plate. Always go for the lower plate, as it's paper thin and you're going to pretty much guaranteed to go through. And if the FV215b comes around a corner, as I was talking about earlier, to try and get a shot on you, just plant a shot here. You'll track him and also very likely damage him at the same time. So how about the turret? Well, there's a turret ring here that is 254 millimeters thick, which makes it very flat from the front. So if you've got a shot into here, take it. If you've got a high penetration on your gun, for example, if you're a tank destroyer, or if you're firing premium rounds. But be careful about firing at the cheeks of this tank, as we can see they are very well angled, and so that means that frontally you're likely to ricochet, with 300 millimeters of effective armor here and 300 millimeters of effective armor here, going all the way up to an auto ricochet, even if the tank is not using its 7 degrees of gun depression. And if the tank is using its 7 degrees of gun depression like this, you're probably best to not try and shoot at it, or try and jam one into the turret ring. One thing that's interesting about the FV215b is there is a cupola on top of the tank that is 101 millimeters thick, but as we can see from the side here, it is very well angled. And so what this means is that if he's using his gun depression, you're going to be bouncing off this all day long. But if you're on an equal plane to the FV215b, it's still going to be very well angled. Here we can see 70 degrees. You need to be slightly above the tank before you can actually shoot at the upper part of this cupola. However, when you're on an equal playing field, there is this area along here that we can see from the side that is not angled, and this should be your ticket to penetrating the top of an FV215b. Or alternatively, you can aim to the left at these viewports here, where there's 152 millimeters of armor that's rather flat as well. Think of this like a waterfall. You don't want to shoot it on the slope, you want to shoot it where it's going straight down in these two areas. And if you're an FV215b driver, you just want to do everything to stop your opponents from getting your side armor. As we can see, 152 millimeters and such a long, fat turret. It's very hard to hide this and frustrating for re-engaging your opponents. You have to consider that if you give your opponents your side armor or your rear armor, they're just going to be able to take you down very quickly indeed. So obviously the FV215b needs to try and side scrape, and I feel like this is about as an effective angling as you can get. So if you imagine this being a corner, coming out like this in an FV215b just makes the whole of the side of your tank along here an auto ricochet because it's more than 70 degrees. Also, it makes this upper part of your tank a ricochet as well because it's higher than 70 degrees. And your turret is very, very, very thick apart from the two areas that we talked about, and even you get to hide this weak point if you want to side scrape around a corner like this. But there is one position on an FV215b that should become blaringly obvious, at least when you're looking at an armor viewer like this. But when we're looking at the visual viewer like this, it is not so obvious. A bit like the corners of a Japanese heavy tank when it's trying to side scrape. And so this means that if an FV215b is trying to side scrape you, then just shoot it here. This is the easiest location to penetrate on both sides. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of FV215b drivers who are going to hate that I've told you guys this. So one of the great aspects to the FV215b is it has one of the highest hit points in the game of 2,500. It's only the German and the Japanese heavy tanks that get more than that, and the IS-4 that gets a similar amount. And when you combine the fact that this has the second highest DPM in the game and one of the highest hit points, this tank can pretty much go one-on-one with anything, and while it's certainly going to take damage, as long as you shoot well you're going to take down your opponent first. The vehicle also has 410 meters view range, which is very nice. In fact, it's the only heavy tank in the game that gets above 400 meters, so use that to your advantage when spotting. But unfortunately, I would never recommend to use a premium consumable, at least in replacement of a fire extinguisher on this tank, as it seems to go up in smoke quite a lot and lose its fuel tanks when it gets shot in the front. So I think that about covers everything. Let's see how this beast performs in some gameplay.
Let's get this show on the road.
So firstly, I'm going to be playing on Siegfried Line, a third of the enemy team, a tier 10, 9 and 8 pretty much, so a nice even balanced matchup. There are no self-propelled guns on the enemy team, which does make me feel a lot safer about if I want to try and side scrape around some corners. In the FV215b on this map, there are quite a few positions that I'd like to use. 1, side scrape here and shoot down here. 2, side scrape here and shoot down here. There are a few other locations which you could use. Pretty much Siegfried Line, at least the city, is a dream for side scraping, and so there's lots of locations that I'd like to get myself into, even being as far back as here. Or alternatively, if I spawned on the other side, I'd like to use this location where I could hide most of my hull armor and just use my turret armor to engage my opponents. So I'm pushing in aggressively into the town. I want to take up this position, which I guess this red brick church looks like a church. Something like that. I'm going to try and hold this corner. So we bounce our first shot, unfortunately, off that vehicle there, but I'm going to ignore that as we're going to try and focus on if this IS-3 comes around the corner. Now I make a big mistake. Look at this. This is over-angling and badly side-scraping your tank. So this damaged my track and also ammo-racked my tank. This is how you don't side-scrape. Look at how I adjust the position when I realize after I take a shot at him. That is the difference between losing your ammo rack and losing 400 hit points and not. This is perfect side scraping. How I had it before is how you lose all of your hit points and your ammo rack and look like a complete muppet against a tier 8 heavy tank that's obviously two tiers lower than you. But look at the aim time and the accuracy there. Putting a clutch shot into that T62A just before he's able to pull back around the corner. As I mentioned, 1.7 seconds aim time and excellent dispersion values while turning the turret, while turning the tank, do allow this thing to just pinpoint in the shots. And then your 6.9 rounds a minute rate of fire on the FV215b is just wonderful for continuously picking apart your opponents. And so this position, it's just super important, in my opinion, on this map. Not only do you stop people from harassing where the T62A is, there he goes, he's trying it again. We put in another shot. There is simply no heavy tanks really out there, I think, at tier 10 that would have been able to put those two shots in as reliably as the FV215b. This thing has more of kind of medium tank gun handling, and that's one of the things that makes this tank special. And so if you like medium tanks, at least with regards to the gun handling on the tier 10, and you want to have something like that on a heavy tank, then really should look no further than the FV215b. So I'm trying to get a shot on the 268 there, try and find his cupola, don't quite manage to get a shot round the corner. You've got to be careful when you're trying to side scrape against an Object 268. That is a quick way to lose 750 of your hit points. But I'm not too worried. I can side scrape him just fine. I fire a little too high there. I should have shot at the lower plate. And there we go. My track's absorbing the punishment. No damage taken. You're really safe to side scrape here. And it's all about the enemies trying to get a shot into this location, like I highlighted in the garage. But luckily for me, it doesn't look like my opponents know that. Foolish play there by the Jagdpanzer E100. Comes around the corner, we track him, but he uses his repair kit, and I don't really want to risk it that badly. Try and side scrape out, wait for the Object 268. Take a clutch shot at him, unfortunately only tracking him, no damage there. That 268's armor is very troll if you don't aim at it properly. Finally, we put a good shot in. But unfortunately for us, he manages to penetrate us and also manages to kill our driver. Look at that, the tiniest little shot. Really good hit there by the Object 268. Maybe I wasn't side scraping perfectly, or he couldn't have hit any further to the left. If it hit any further to the left, it would have got absorbed by my tracks and also by the 70 degrees of angling on my side armor. Whoops, that IS-7 makes a mistake. Easy punishing kill there. And this tank really is just an absolute beast in this kind of position, just continuously side scraping, holding down the fort for the team. This matchup, while we do have some statistically strong players, a lot of their better players are in their top-tier tanks, and we're losing quite a few of our players as well that I really wouldn't want to be losing in this situation. Now the Jagdpanzer E100's trying to sidescrape. 0.33 accuracy that this tank has. You know, you can't afford to give an FV215b a shot onto one of your weak points. Maybe a different tank you could get away with that more times out of 10 than not, but with an FV215b, it just feels so safe. An absolute meaty sounding ricochet there. The Jagdpanzer E100 didn't quite work out for him there. Let me just see if I can get my ricochet thing working again. I don't know why it bugs out. No, I can't see what's ricocheted off the tank anymore. Anyway, what was concerning me right now is that this Jagdpanzer E100, that was a bit of a bad shot. I aimed that one a little too high. What was concerning me right now is that these Jagdpanzer E100s on the enemy team are in a platoon. And fair enough, you can sidescrape this corner, but when your tank is as long as this, you can't afford to sidescrape too far backwards, or the Jagdpanzer E100 is going to be trying to hunt a sneaky shot through here. Let's see if he's actually trying to do that. Yeah, he is looking for it. He is totally looking for a shot through there, and we definitely do not want to give it to him. That will be probably the end. Well, not quite the end. We've got 1,400 hit points. Oh my word, talk about Jagdpanzer E100. Bounces off us with a nice side scrape. We managed to put a shot into him. Trying to find a shot into his cupola. Oh no, not quite there. We angle our frontal armor, hope that the IS-3 bounces off us, side scrape our tank again, don't quite manage to get a shot. I'm under a lot of pressure here, and frankly, I am making a couple of misplays with a few of the clutch shots that I should be putting in. But all's well that ends well, at least for now. Oh, dear gosh, not a good shot there. Missing that tiny little gap. Come on, FV215b. Fair enough, we've done 3,700 damage, but this game is a lot closer than you consider. So a good shot there into the IS-3, shutting him down. And I don't want to give up my side to where I thought the Waffenträger Panzerwehr is, or possibly the T95. I thought that maybe they could be around this area. And indeed, we do get shot. Not very... Don't know where that one actually came from. Maybe it was the Waffenträger Panzerwehr, or possibly the T95 blind firing that corner. So now I come up with a plan with the T62A. I let him know that I want him to scout out the Waffenträger Panzerwehr. And now I'm loading a Hess shell. And I forgot to talk about this in the garage. This tank actually gets amazing high explosive rounds. They have 515 alpha damage, but that's not what's special about these high explosive rounds. What's special is that they have 120 millimeters of penetration. That's absolutely crazy. When you combine the fact that this tank has second best DPM on any heavy tank in the game, with the fact that it also has high explosive rounds which would increase that DPM by about 28% more, and they've also got 120 millimeters of penetration, this thing is just absolutely monstrous for handling tanks such as a Batchat, if you can hit its flat parts of its armor, or alternatively, if there's a Waffenträger E100, or as we just saw there, Alpha Panzerwehr, we can just shut them down so much faster. Now, will the FV215b get over these tank traps? Have a little bit of a wiggle. Just a little bit of a wiggle. Come on, we can do it. Yeah! Fair enough, this tank may be very low profile, but we're just enough. We rubbed the tank with butter on the bottom there to be able to get over that slope. And while this game does look fairly safe here, the Jagdpanzer E100 is one of those tanks that's a little tricky to dig out. So I'm going to advance to try and get the side of the vehicle there. And I see that the IS-3 on my team took a hit there for about 400. And so that means that the T95 on the enemy team is likely to be using the 120 millimeter. The T95 shuts down the T54E1. We have a nice side of a very healthy Jagdpanzer E100, and this is where you want to be in World of Tanks. We've got to force him out of position. I get spotted. Let's pull back. Luckily, the Black Widow in the Jagdpanzer E100 doesn't turn towards me. He turns towards the 48, and so we managed to penetrate the back of his tank. Well, I don't want to sit around here because a T95 with 120 millimeter will make short work of me. I want to try and help out my team because they seem to be wilting away against this Jagdpanzer E100. And that's certainly not the tank that you want to leave alone against your allies. I'm sure the T95 is likely to kill the 121. Oh, they just didn't understand where the 1-2... They didn't understand where the T95 was, did they? Good play there by the enemy team. Well played to the Jagdpanzer E100. Manages to punish a couple of tanks on our team, and now we're left in a 2 versus 2. So now I'm going to be loading some APCR rounds. These APCR rounds have 326mm of penetration, much more likely that I'm going to be able to go through the superstructure of the Jagdpanzer 100. Unfortunately for me, the IS-3 track blocked our shell, and the Jagdpanzer 100, I guess fortunately for me, rather than unfortunately, manages to bounce off our armor. We bounce a shell, we bounce another shell, and right now I was starting to panic, but not too much because he's going to have to ammo rack me if he wants to kill me here. And from this position, we're able to just outplay a clumsy tank destroyer. That's why having the turret is just a significant advantage. A few bounces there. I think that a couple of those shots could have gone in against the Jagdpanzer there, but oh well. So right now, I'm just going to work with this T62A again. I should give him a shout out, really. It's 7, spelt with a 7 and an E. Gosh, is that like the movie? Yeah. We played really well together at the end of the game. He spotted the Waffenträger auf Panzer IV for me. We managed to dig him out, and now he's going to enable me to get some lovely, tasty shots into this T95. So, thanks to you, buddy. We communicated really well, and we finished off the game together, I guess, right? So a nice shot into the fuel tanks of the T95 there, set them on fire, and the second one also sets him on fire as well. Talk about a flammable Tier 9 American tank destroyer, netting us a cool 1,496 damage with, I think, 2 shots at the end of the game. And the fact that we only have 6 rounds remaining should give you guys an idea of what I was talking about with the ammunition loadout that the FV215b has. The fact that it can only have, I think it was 34 rounds, is really lacking. And so if you miss or ricochet a bunch of shells like I did in this replay, when you start to get up into the 6,000 damage mark, you could be running low on ammunition. But anyway, let's get stuck into some more gameplay. So now we're going to be playing on the recently changed Sacred Valley. Let's just take a look to see what they've done if you guys don't have an idea. Really, the majority of the changes to this map have happened towards the southeast. As we can see here, the bridge has moved. Previously, the bridge, I believe, was along here. They've flattened that out. That whole area has been flattened out. So now the bridge is in this location. Basically, what they've done is they've made it kind of symmetrical, right? I guess symmetry is balanced, and this kind of area around here wasn't balanced. What you'd have is people just camping in this location, and then this team would pretty much dominate the hill and then decide to press down into the enemy base. But we're not going to worry about that because we're going to focus up on the north. The north hasn't really been changed too much. It's pretty much the same meta along this area, and so that's what we're going to get stuck into in the FV215b. Now, I'm going to get myself into a bit of a sticky situation here very early on in the game. I'm going to try and keep up with what I was thinking. So remember, this tank has a very big, fat front, and your enemies will see the front of your tank before you see them. Cue the ambush by a T49. Would you believe it? A T49. Luckily, my reactions managed to put a shot into him, and now the IS-3 damages my fuel tank, sets me on fire from the front, and oh my word, there's a T57 heavy there. Luckily, we track him, hold him in place, and the E100 ammo racks him with a single shot. I'm not sure if I managed to damage that guy's ammo rack or not. And then the T10 also penetrates my lower plate. So, not good so far, right? Look at those 2 new exhausts that I have on the front of my tank. That's generally not what you want to happen. And because my side armor is so weak, the T49 was able to splash his 152mm derp gun for 414 damage on the front of my vehicle. So, a pretty disastrous start to the FV215b. But even though I've taken quite a bit of a kicking, I still have 1,150 hit points left. It really is nice to have the 2,500 point margin of enabling you to make mistakes, I guess. So how am I going to get myself back into this game? Well, I'm going to get myself back into this game by trying to shoot down this hut, but for some reason the shell didn't go at all where I aimed it. I have to admit, this was a replay from a couple days ago, and the servers were pretty damn laggy. But my second shell, I managed to shoot the hut. Look at me, I'm so good. And I'm just trying to avoid the shot from the IS-7 here. He doesn't really have very much chance of going through me. He would have been a lucky dog to have done that. Now, I don't want to get stuck in too much. There is a Jagdpanzer E100 there. Is he from the last game? No, he's not. And there's a Speerpanzer trying to ambush us. I don't really like that very much. But just look at the aim time on this tank. It's just so beautiful. Lovely turret traverse, great aim time, and I think this guy is genuinely surprised about how fast my rate of fire is as we punish him again. He's lucky to have survived that. He's on 11 hit points. We only rolled for 370. He should have died most times out of 10. but alas, we have to leave him alone. So now I'm going to try and harass around this flank. I feel like those big German tanks are going to be able to hold that location, and I'm going to go and try and stop the enemy team from flanking. Hopefully we can get revenge on this little bastard of a T-49 who got us earlier. We put one round into him, and my rate of fire should enable me to finish him off, but I decide to shoot this IS-3 instead, and the T-10 finishes off the T-49. So we didn't quite manage to get revenge. Wow, this game, even though it's only 3.5 minutes long, is pretty much... It's either going to be won or lost by one team very, very, very quickly. This E100 is doing the age-old mistake of turn your turret where you're trying to reverse. That's not good. I can't worry too much about the Speerpanzer. I have to start shooting this IS-7, but the E100 finishes him off. But we put a good shot into his tracks there to hold him down. Look for the Speerpanzer, find the shot, finish him off. Now it's time to go and fight an ST-1. And now this is one of the key showcasing moments of the FV215b here. Clutch shots, even on the move. You see that the bloom of the reticle doesn't even really get that higher. Reloaded again, second shot in. Of course he's firing some premium rounds to compensate here. That's understandable, he's engaging a tank that's higher tier, and really he doesn't have much chance. Another shot into his lower plate puts our damage total to 1,097 against him. He fires his heat round at our gun. That's not going to help you, buddy. Finally a roll that is not low this game, 419 damage. Leaving him on a smidgen of his health. I decide to ignore him and put one into the T-95. I didn't want the T-95 to turn and engage me. Now I decide to finish off the ST-1. That's how worried I was about him, really, that I didn't even really feel like I needed to shoot him. Who to kill, who to kill, who to kill? T-95 first, and now we're going to engage this T-110E4. I just love the rate of fire. The rate of fire means that you can put in precise shots, and do you see how much damage we just did at the end of the game just so quickly? And that's what happens when you start to finally stop sucking and get some momentum in the FV215b. This tank punishes mistakes faster than any other heavy tank that does not have an autoloader. This was a 46%, but we still managed to get through it. And boy, what an aggressive round this was on Sacred Valley, lasting just over 5 minutes, and we were able to do 5,700 damage. Even though we faffed around at the start of the game so much, you really only need about a minute of continuous fire in the FV215b to have a pretty good game. Anyway, let's just take a quick look at the post-game stats for both of these rounds. So our first round on Siegfried Line was a high caliber for the 6,771 damage that we dealt, over double what anyone else on our team was able to pick up. 5 kills, in addition to damaging 4 other opponents. We didn't quite get enough to get a Top Gun or even a Confederate. My marksmanship was certainly not excellent in that game. We hit 23 out of 29 and only 16 of those penetrated. But luckily we side-scraped well enough, and thankfully our enemies didn't know about those weak points I was telling you about earlier, to get through the game with a huge amount of our hit points left over and still over 2,000 damage blocked, and also a nice bit of a profit. So next up on Sacred Valley, we got a high caliber and a steel wall medal, 5,700 damage in literally 5 minutes. And this time we blocked 2,600 damage, giving us a potential damage received of 4,300. Our marksmanship was better this game, hitting 17 out of 19 and 17 of those penetrating. And we also managed to do over 2,500 damage assistance for our team, including detracking some opponents, and made a cool 45,000 credits profit. Very good for a 5-minute tier 10 game, because we didn't have to fire those APCR rounds, and thankfully I didn't miss a bunch of my shots this time. So the FV215b, a funny old vehicle that may or may not have long left in the game. Will we ever see the Chieftain as a replacement for the FV215b? Well, your guess is as good as mine, but I don't really see the point of replacing this tank. At least leave it in the game in some kind of a reward form. The fact of the matter is that the FV215b is quite a novel tier 10 heavy tank. I love the way that it side scrapes. I love its gun handling. I love the fact that it's got that monstrous rate of fire. As I mentioned, the second highest DPM on any heavy tank in the game. But I don't feel like its armor is overpowered, a bit like the T10E5 at the moment. The lower plate is just garbage. It does have weak points on top of its turret that can be taken advantage of. And also, now you guys are the wiser as to where you have to shoot this tank if it's seemingly impenetrable when it's side scraping with its rear mounted turret. And so while I feel that if the Chieftain goes into the game with the statistics that I showcased in my preview video, that it's going to be a force to be reckoned with, I truly hope that we don't see the end of the FV215b and it becomes another Aufklärungspanzer Panther. And so hopefully you guys enjoyed this review, or maybe it was just useful to you. If it was, please consider giving it a like down below. It really helps the channel out. And if this video has sparked your interest in the FV215b or its possible replacement, the Chieftain, then simply click through up here and you can go through to a plethora of relevant Tier 10 British heavy tank replays. And let me know in the comments down below what you guys think about the FV215b and its possible replacement, the Chieftain. Do you think it's necessary, or do you think the tank is as fine as it is? Especially if you're an FV215b lover out there, let me know why. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.